How are you guys? Great. I'm glad to be here again. I'm Darius, and I know that you guys are learning some things about leadership. So I want to tell you a quick story. A young man, a house that is bombed. People in the front yard with weapons, ready to retaliate. What does this young leader decide to do? I say this because you all are leaders. And depending on how you show up to your day, it's going to depend upon how you're going to interact and react with the challenges that will come before you. A side note to that story, there's another story about a salesman who has this big contract that he's about to do. It's going to be life-changing. But that morning, he decides to listen to the news. And the news is bad news, and it has an impact on him. And then he decides to get in his car, and he's driving on the expressway, and he nearly gets cut off. And because of his emotion that he experienced when he watched the news, he begins to cuss out the person that cut him off. He then finally gets to the appointment, and he enters into the room with the prospects who are excited to see him, but when they see him, they see his countenance is down. So their countenance goes down. And rather than getting this life-changing sale, this salesman gets that deathly objection called, well, we'll think about it. So he goes home and he has to face his family. And he sits down in his chair and he falls asleep and he has a nightmare. And in this nightmare, there are two wolves. A good wolf and a bad wolf. And the two wolves are barking at each other, and he's so disturbed, he shouts out of his dream, and his son is there, and he's like, "Daddy, what's wrong? What happened?" And the father says to the little boy, "I just had a nightmare. There were these two wolves in my head, and they were barking at each other. One was a good wolf, and one was a bad wolf." And the little boy said, "Well, Daddy, if the two wolves were to fight, which one would win?" And the daddy thought about it. And he said to himself, "Son, the one I feed the most." How are you feeding yourself today? A young man, leader, a bombed house, and a community in the front lawn with weapons, ready to retaliate. The young man, Martin Luther King Jr., was preaching at a church. And suddenly, before he knew it, Ralph Abernathy, his best friend, came to him and said, "Martin, I'm sorry to tell you that your house has been bombed." And Betty and Yolanda were in the house. Yolanda, his oldest daughter. Martin Luther King said that he couldn't remember how he got to his home. He just knew he blacked out, and before he knew it, he was there. Only to find the house destroyed, but his wife and his daughter are okay. But outside were the community with weapons, ready to retaliate for this young leader. Which wolf was Martin Luther King feeding that day? Which wolf was he feeding the day before and the day before that? Because at this time, it was not uncommon, maybe even now, for churches and the deacons of the church to be armed. But Martin Luther King, in a moment of decision, said, "No, not this way. We're going to do this a different way." he encouraged the people of that community to take their weapons and go back to their homes and return the next day to organize and fight in a different way. And later, to inspire that crowd, he would say to them, I know some of you all are asking yourselves this afternoon, how long will it take? But I want you to know, no matter how difficult the moment, no matter how frustrating the hour, it won't be long. Because truth pressed to the earth will rise again. How long? Not long. Because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long. Because you still reap what you sow. How long? Not long. Because the arm of the moral universe is long, but it still bends its way toward justice. How long? Not long, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out to vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He's loosed his fatal lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. He's sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He's lifted up the hearts of man before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Thank you.